Side quest video here. This is the Geekom Mini Air 11 N5095. And while I go ahead and run some tests on some other computers, I figured I'd go ahead and open up this computer. And this is a bit of an oldie at this point. This is like from 2021, 2022. It's been working pretty well as like a lab computer. I'm going to be repurposing it as a glorified showroom TV controller, so Geekom made a pretty decent kind of plastic case around it, and one of my favorite things about this was back then this was one of the best cooled N5095 mini PCs because it had a reasonably large fan in there. Figured I haven't made a video of opening this machine up. We can take a look inside. Here's some basic information. 19 volts, 3.5 amps. That translates to about 65 watts. The actual processor doesn't use that much power. It uses something like 10 to 20 watts on average, maybe 30 watts tops. I should go over the ports. You do get an SD card reader, so I like that for my 3D printers. USB-C on the front, USB-A, headphone audio jack, power button. These four holes here, I'm not sure why they're there. There's no microphone in there, but I guess if you're familiar with some other B-Link mini PCs like the Sur 9, this Sur 9 also has four holes on the front. And there's a few other mini PCs that do that. I'm not sure why. It's possible these holes could be used for like holding the case for painting or something else, but honestly, I'm just speculating. Kensington lock, Ethernet, DisplayPort, a couple more USB-A ports, HDMI, and a USB-C port. This USB-C port actually works for display out, so you could run about 3 displays out. The mini DisplayPort is a very weird choice. It works. I got tons of adapters because I just had a bunch of computers that used them back in the day, but if you don't have one of these things are typically like underneath $10 for an adapter if you need one. And yeah, there's not too much going around with this mini PC. It is essentially like a little Intel NUC. And Geekom, I used the wrong bit for that. I want a PH1 bit. I used PH0. That's much too small. Oh, well, I got PH2 here. This might be a little bit chunky, but does it fit? It's a little too chunky. Let's see. PH1. Yep. That feels good. So PH1. Go ahead and open this up. This is VESA mountable. It's got the 2 screws here where a VESA mount plate would be connected to. And it uses a standard 5.5 by 2.5 millimeter barrel jack connector. So if you have a power supply from older computers or other computers that have 19 volts, you can connect it to this computer. Alrighty. Those are some long screws. Yep, Mini Air 11. They have a new version called Mini Air 12. It's essentially the same machine, except with a newer N100 processor. This is not coming out. Yeet. No. This is perhaps one of those things where I wish there was like a little pull tab so I'm not yanking on the actual screws. But it's snug. It is very snug in there. Plastic pry bar tool. Can I? No. Oh, there we go. I just have to use a disturbing amount of force to pull it out. Great. Alright, so this is the internals. Thermal pad, just a heatsink to the SSD drive there. And anything interesting to note here? No, it's pretty basic. It's got 8 gigabytes of 2666 megahertz RAM, or megatransfers per second RAM. So this is very minimalist. These days, this processor could have used a 3200 megahertz stick, megatransfer stick, to run at N5095 megatransfers. So this is a bit slower than that. And these days, 2666 would be considered slow, so times change. And also the SSD is a M.2 SATA drive. So it's not even NVMe, but I think this drive, yeah, this connector can connect to a PCIe 3.0 drive. So Geekom, it's kind of one of their old quirks. They put very cheap components in their mini PCs. They don't necessarily do that anymore these days, but it's still not like the best hardware that you could get if you were like going around buying a bare bones kit and custom assembling it. So take out the SSD. Whoop. Get a little better look at that. And you can tell it is a M.2 SATA SSD by the two notches over here. If it was NVMe, it would only have one notch up top here. Bottom here would be about solid. Alrighty. And the RAM, you can just unclip it by just pulling the two metal slides, and RAM just pops right out. Cool. Anything interesting, I guess? Well, it uses a lot of DIMMs, which on both sides, which is good to see. You can tell if you've gotten your hands on a bit of a cheaper RAM stick if there's DIMMs on only one side, but it can vary still. And I want to take a quick little peek at, here we go. And the wireless controller is soldered to the main board. I'm not a big fan of seeing that anymore these days, because I like to upgrade the wireless device once in a while. But this should be adequate, because this will be used for very minimalistic stuff. I'm not sure what this controller is. Model 7265D2W. Well, if I had to take a guess... it says it's Intel-based. Oh, alright. It's not an AX type, or higher quality Intel controller, but if it says Intel, okay. There are two screws here. It's missing the 4 screws around the edges because that's what would have screwed into the base plate. All right, and with those 2 screws out, I can pop this machine out by flexing the plastic ever so gently. I think, if I remember, the usual way of pulling these things out is to go from the rear and just wedge it from the front. Yeah, there we go. So wherever the rear I/O is, you just want to not flex the plastic so much, but that is where you want to tilt the main machine. And before I forget, I'm going to also disconnect the wireless antennas. And there is a plastic sheet on top of the antennas. Of course there is. If you guys can't tell, I'm doing this without my usual glasses, so I can't barely see. But, okay, there we go. Feels good weight there. Just need to separate it without yanking anything. Ah, there we go. Lovely. All right, so what kind of fan do we have? Oh, well, we got a 70 by 7 millimeter fan. Well, I was hoping for a little bit larger. 80 millimeters would have been grand, but this is still above average from what I normally see in mini PCs. You got a couple heat pipes, or yeah, there's 2 heat pipes down there, which is really just an overkill amount of cooling for an N5095. What the heat pipes do is that they bridge out and then outwards down here. And then this is the CMOS battery if you ever need to reach to it. Thankfully, if you're just opening the main board normally, you can just disconnect this cable, and that'll help you reset the BIOS if you do anything yucky in there. There isn't too much control that you have in there, but still, it's kind of interesting. You're kidding me. It might appear that they've put some glue on the fan connector, but I'm not quite sure. Let me give that a yank if I can remove that. Oh, no. Okay, so I can remove that. Great. And on the bottom of here, we have some good size antenna pads. These aren't the biggest I've ever seen, but these are also a lot bigger than what I've seen in some B-Link's older mini PCs. So that's good. And I expect the Mini Air 12 to be almost the same. It's got sheet metal casing all around it to reinforce the plastic. That's cool. That's above average from what most manufacturers do. And let's see. I want to take a quick peek underneath the fan since I've gotten this far. 5-volt fan. It's a wonderful platform Geekom built. Oh, there we go. Wow. Okay, well, that's a lot more fancy than I was hoping, than I was expecting. So, yeah, 2 heat pipes, copper plate here, another copper plate actually for the VRMs. That is very overkill. You can see, I don't know if you can really see it, but there's like 2 little MOSFET or VRM capacitor thingies. I don't know. But there's really not much underneath here. But Geekom has taken the effort into breaking out the metal and copper over here with a thermal pad. Yeah, this is a very overkill kind of cooling solution for an N5095. All the better if it's being used on an N100. Supposedly lower TDP, so lower heat output, better temperatures. And yeah, there isn't a whole lot going on with this. I think Geekom had built a pretty nice machine. It just wasn't that much popular back in the day because a lot of stuff was very expensive, and this was not exactly the cheapest N5095 mini PC. Also, Intel at the time was still selling their own mini PCs. Their NUC 11s with an N5105 were much more popular and cost about almost the same. People would prefer to buy from Intel, but that's kind of hard to do these days because Intel is not exactly selling their mini PCs as much and have handed the reins over to Asus. Go figure. It's got a little bit of a twist to it. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this machine, reinsert the RAM, and get on with my troubleshooting adventure with this machine. There we go. Fan connector is back in. And I'm going to insert it from the front, slide in the rear I/O. Easy as that. Hold on. Just gotta nudge all those little metal clips down, and not too difficult. I'm wasting a decent amount of time talking in between figuring out my bearings. If you're trying to do this yourself, I hope this helps somebody who is wrestling with their Geekom Mini Air 11. If not, cool, no worries. I hope Geekom makes more machines like this and just kind of gradually improves their work and quality control. Really, my biggest complaint would probably be the cost and the subpar RAM and SSD. It's possible that they've already fixed this with the Mini Air 12, but I work with what I got here. Alright, SSD, plug that in. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Wait a second. Before I do that, screw down the main board. Alright. Cool. Disconcerting clicks. Well, everything seems to be fine. Insert the SSD one more time. M.2 screw. I'm using a PH. What is this? A PH 0-bit. Yeah. Seems to be one of my favorite bits now for installing and upgrading these computers. I'm actually going to do something really weird. Usually, it's better to put the RAM in the lower slot. Okay, but because I am doing some OS troubleshooting with this computer, I'm making an exception. I'm putting the RAM in the other slot. It's going to be really weird, but in a future video, if I make an update on this, it'll probably make a little bit more sense what I'm trying to do here, because Windows is yucky sometimes. I'm just going to have to try something different to get everything working. Don't tell me I'm putting this in upside down or something. Nope. All right. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's perhaps one of the easier disassemblies and reassemblies. I gotta give Geekom some credit here. They don't overcomplicate it too much. It's pretty simple. Meanwhile, if I open up some other mini PCs, it's like, holy cow, it's a whole carnival ride inside. But that's one of my favorite things about mini PCs. It's a simple, really minimalist box. If your pockets are big enough, it'll fit, but this thing's palm size. It's tiny. It'll fit underneath the TV that I'm going to install, and it's just going to play slideshows and short little videos. It's going to be nice. Alrighty, you guys have a wonderful day. Have a great time with your mini PCs. Yep, bye.